everybody, and welcome back to another installment of Built by Us, the video series. Today, we're going to be talking about organizing in rural parts of North Carolina, specifically in the eastern part of North Carolina. Built by Us is a video series that spawned from our podcast series, so be sure to check out Built by Us, the podcast, on anywhere you would listen, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. And thanks for tuning in today. I've got a special guest with me, Lucas Seijo. He's our Eastern Regional Managing Organizer. And Lucas hails from the East, born and raised in New Bern, North Carolina, and graduated at NC State University with a degree in Political Science and Agriculture Science. Lucas Seijo is a two-time Democracy Summer alumni, which is our program that teaches students how to organize people around a shared vision for a better democracy. So graduated as a freshman and as a second year. And Lucas's passion is bridging community-based advocacy and activism with agriculture. Hey, Lucas.
Hey, thanks for having me today.
Yeah, thanks for being here. How are you doing?
I'm living the dream one day at a time.
Yes. Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do for Democracy North Carolina.
Yeah, so I'm a dog and cat dad out in the East. Just, you know, and we're it's an interesting community out there. I do a lot of driving, of course, across all different counties, going where I can. But yeah, within my position in Democracy NC, we're really just trying to get as much education and awareness out there, making sure people know what's going on and then what they can do directly in order to make their situations better or get involved with the things that they're concerned about. So it's a lot, and we're getting it done in a lot of different communities across the area too.
Yeah, and I would say North Carolina is long. It's 8 hours long.
Yeah, people forget that. People forget that North Carolina is very long, yes.
Like a barbecue sandwich.
Yeah.
And you talk about like the driving that you do and kind of the areas that you cover. What are the types of issues and folks, what are the things that folks care about out east?
Yeah, there's quite an array. I think there's common issues that across the state that still affect out east when it comes to housing, rent prices. Education is always a big one. In fact, we're seeing a couple of problems with education across Eastern North Carolina as Board of Education races become partisan or some different redistricting issues happening across the area. The environment is a big one we see out there. There's a history of pollution in the East, a history of environmental degradation due to large industries. Yeah. So that's something that has affected a lot of people and continues to affect people, as generations go on, and we see that it just takes so much longer for the land to heal from the stuff that's already happened to it. Yeah.
And we're filming this, only a week or so out from Hurricane Helene that devastated Western North Carolina, and we know that the impacts of the climate catastrophe is not new to North Carolinians, and particularly in the East. Yeah. The East has been hit by previous hurricanes, Hurricane Matthew, Hurricane Florence, and other, catastrophic events. So what types of community organizing and mutual aid do you see happening in your part of the state?
Yeah, so we have, it's really funny, the way my region is set up and kind of where my primary focus areas are, starting with Rocky Mount, flowing down to New Bern. That's quite literally the path that the floodwaters take as it's released afterwards. And so I grew up in the areas where every single time we had a hurricane, it was just very detrimental to the community. Just houses being destroyed, flood damage. If you go out there, you see so many houses that are just built on top of stands because they know that they're near floodwaters and they know it's going to flood like that. So it's something that I grew up seeing and growing up understanding that this is something that we have to keep an eye out for and help each other. But when it comes to mutual aid and what we do, that's like something that's a great part of my job, is that we're not always just focused on voting, but we're focusing on how we can connect people with the resources they need to ensure that they're okay, that they're everything's taken care of, and that any issues we have concerned about are going to be met. And so yeah, it's really great to see the kind of way the community turns out after such catastrophes. And right now, there is a lot being done with groups across the East, and they are collecting funds for that out West because they know how these types of things are, and understand what kind of resources are really needed at this time in order to ensure that everybody's safe and okay out West.
Yeah, the East has a really diverse population of folks. You've got Latin populations, indigenous populations. The Lumbee tribe is out there amongst other tribes. You've got a large student population and
Yeah.
Black communities out there. Like, what are you seeing? What are like the trends of the issues? Like what's motivating them? Like they care about these things, right?
Hmm.
But like, what's going to get them to the polls?
So that definitely changes depending on who you're talking to. With a lot of younger voters, especially student voters, reproductive rights are a big drive. I think that's, across the state, across the nation, a big drive to get out the vote this year. Health is another one that people are just continually worried about and continually making sure. Out east, we've had a number of hospitals closed down just because people are moving, and in these rural areas where you had hospitals before, there just wasn't enough to sustain them too, and so you have people who have to travel longer distances to get the help that they need, and it becomes scary when you start thinking about if you have a medical emergency and you have to get somewhere out like that. Like I was saying, environmental issues are always a big one, and we've seen in areas like Tarboro or like Greenville, and definitely out in parts of Vanceboro and Craven County, where the environment is just it's just not conducive to a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah.
And we're seeing industries come in that could be even more detrimental to the environment around there and just the health of the communities. And especially when you think about how important agriculture is to the East. I mean, it's a huge industry out there. I work with a number of people who have farms and do their own food growing for themselves and their families. And I actually also work directly with like a co-op group too that focuses on making sure that farmers are okay and have what they need and are connected to the resources they need with the USDA. So also focusing on that too, and recognizing what we need to do, who we need to put into place in order to ensure that our food is also okay. And then I would say the last one, which again is just statewide, but there is a very heightened awareness on this year, is education.
Yeah.
Education is huge. Public schools out east just do not get, as a product of public schools out east, they just do not get the resources they need. And especially the way things are trending within the General Assembly, the way things are trending with different races that are happening that directly affect public education.
And Leandro.
Leandro, yeah. People forget that I was just talking to a group last week about how the courts are, how the courts affect the public education and how they have affected public education. So,
and for those that don't know about the Leandro case, Google it really quickly. It basically is a case that's been around since the 90s, where the North Carolina State Constitution guarantees a free and fair, safe and accessible education for students. That's written in our state constitution. Mm-hmm. And so what this Supreme Court case is saying, and it was from specific counties in North Carolina, rural counties, where these folks sued and said, we aren't getting the funding we need. This is part of our state constitution, and this funding is not being allocated specifically to these rural communities. And because of the politicization of the North Carolina Supreme Court, they have punted billions of dollars that have been allocated for public schools in North Carolina for decades. And it's just been this political game of saying, oh, well, it's the state legislators' issue to resolve. Oh, it's the court's issue to resolve. And it's this game back and forth where really the public schools that need the funding are stuck in the middle.
They are. And my sister's a elementary school teacher at a Title I school in Craven County. And so we talk a lot about this, and just a lot about how she has such great students who are driven and they love learning and they love interacting with her, but just that it's the resources just aren't there for them to get everything they can out of. And at that point, we're just, perpetuating this cycle. And it's so sad. And then, of course, you see the General Assembly is happy to throw millions of dollars for vouchers, and without even, people knowing about it. And so
and they just did that.
They just did that. They just did that. And everyone's, I was like, what the heck's that? I thought, and I was like, no. And they're like, can they do that? I'm like, they can do whatever they want.
They are and have been doing whatever they want.
They really are. And so, and it always, so many of these things, especially the other part of that bill, when we're talking about sheriffs cooperating with ICE, that's another thing that a lot of people out east are concerned about. And
we're talking about House Bill 10, was just passed a few weeks ago in the North Carolina General Assembly behind closed doors and undercover. It originally was this anti-immigrant racist bill that required sheriffs to cooperate with ICE. And then they added this millions of dollars of funding in public school vouchers to this bill, which had nothing to do with that originally. So take a look at that, but keep going.
Yeah, and so you talked about what issues matter to Latinx communities. I do a lot of work with different Hispanic and Latinx rights organizations out east. And so I have a lot of conversation. It's really cool because they have a lot of organizers that are my age, so we're able to talk with one another and just learn more from one another in the work that we do. And so that bill's always been a concern. This isn't the first time we've seen it in the General Assembly. And so that's a concern, especially with the rhetoric that's going around right now and the way that these communities are already being targeted. Doesn't matter if you are a citizen or not. Just the type of worries that people have because there's such a heightened awareness on Latinx and Hispanic communities right now. And so definitely making sure that we have people in the General Assembly and there are leaders throughout that are keeping an eye out and are protecting all people across the East and not just the select group of voters or people that they have feel that they get to represent directly.
Yeah, I mean, we the people elect those in power. And that's why it's so important to look at all the races on the ballot. Can you talk about? We all know about the presidential election, and for better or worse, North Carolina seems to always get the spotlight, and our governor's race is certainly getting a spotlight right now. But those down ballot races are literally, if not just as important, more important.
100%.
So and what would be some races that you would want people to focus on?
Yes, and I'm going to reiterate what you said right there, and that honestly, the lower you go down the ballot, the more important those races are, because those are going to be the people that directly impact you in your everyday life. And so in North Carolina, the most important branch or institution we have is our General Assembly. They have assumed so much power in the past couple of years. They've got the power 100%. That was their motivation, I guess, right there behind closed doors. They're just playing that on loop. But they have amassed so much power in the past couple of years that's why we've seen all of these changes happen very rapidly in the past 2 years. Beginning, looking at when it comes to bodily autonomy, not just reproductive rights, but also looking at transgender rights as well, and the different bills that have gone through there. When we're talking about funding for education, I mean, we haven't had like a good budget process in how long?
Like literal years.
Yes, literal years.
So it's like this threaten to shut down right before Christmas or threaten to shut down, and then they pass this emergency thing, and it's like, they put up a bill the last budgeting session. They put up a budget bill that was like, over 400 pages. And then they voted on it the next day. You're supposed to read 400 pages in one night.
It's like I said I did that in college, and I can promise you now, after the fact, after grad, I did not. So I was lying.
No amount of AI is going to feed that information into a lawmaker's head.
No, it can't. It can't. But the General Assembly, yes, they really directly affect every North Carolinian. And so I really encourage people, especially if, talking about college students, we all have heard about the DEI changes within the university system in North Carolina. And the way, we look at that and like, well, we can't the board of governors made that decision. We don't get to do, but because the board of governors are chosen by the General Assembly members.
Yeah.
So even though it's a little extra steps, the people that will govern your education at a public university are going to be picked by your General Assembly members. So even if you don't have that indirect step, making sure that you are voting for people that share your values, it will affect you in the long run too.
And General Assembly, we're talking about like State House,
State Senate. So be on the lookout for those. Those are super important. I'll say the other race to keep an eye out for is the state Supreme Court race. We were just talking about Leandro, and we forget that courts are so powerful and that they can take a piece of legislation that was passed and they can throw it out, depending on how they view the lawsuit, or they can continue on with it. Or as we saw at the beginning of last year, they can take it out and then they could come back and they could put it back into place. So they really have a good bit of power there. And we're just continuing to see a Supreme Court that does not fully represent the people, and it is not. And I'm talking about the state Supreme Court, just not the not the people up in their secret robes in DC. Those guys.
Yeah, SCOTUS.
Those guys. Different story, different videos, whole video series.
Yes.
But paying attention to those court races and even the other court races that we'll see down there. Because those, they are the ones who are going to be interpreting the laws and making decisions that affect you, all the way down to traffic infractions and things like that.
Yeah.
So very important to pay attention to.
And if we look in 2020, when the North Carolina State Supreme Court Chief Justice was on the ballot, amongst others in 2022, that race was won by 400 or so votes.
Yeah.
So when we say my vote doesn't count, or does one extra vote matter, when you literally have the entire political makeup of the North Carolina Supreme Court decided by 400 and something votes, that's huge.
Yeah. And I think you brought up like a really good point, in that a lot of people, especially a lot of younger people, feel that their vote doesn't matter. But again, those races, the closer you get to the bottom of your ballot, your vote's going to have a much larger impact there, to where one vote could make the entire difference between who wins your school board election or something like that.
And that has happened. There has been one vote.
They flip. Yeah, there's been like flipping a coin before and stuff like that.
There's been a pen draw.
Yeah. So I mean, we're talking real democratic processes happening here with that. Yeah.
And like you kind of just touch on it, like this misconception of like young folks, like not necessarily engaging in elections or like going down the ballot. Like, where do you think that misconception comes from, and what's the reality of young students and how they care about voting?
Yeah, I'm really not sure where that misconception came from. And that might be me blinded as a young person, as a 25-year-old in North Carolina. I've always seen young people engaged. I think an issue with young people is that we live in times where we're getting so much information at once, and there's so many different ways for us to consume that information. And so if we're just seeing all of this stuff happen, and we're trying to care, we're trying to find ways to interact with it, and it can just be overwhelming, because it's like, at the end of the day, what can I actually do for a country halfway around the world? Or what can I do within the situation I'm in, while also making sure I'm okay too? And so I think because of that, it can be harder. And at the same time, organizations that do this work don't always make themselves as visible as they can, and really doing that reach to get to the college students. But I've had a wonderful experience with college students, especially at East Carolina University, which pains me to say that as a graduate of NC State. So East Carolina, don't get used to that.
Go Pirates.
Well, I didn't say that. Did not say that.
I have no affiliation. I went to Florida State University, so I will sway from Eagles to Pirates to Wolfpack.
As long as we're not Tar Heels, that's fine.
Nobody's a Duke, So
No, that's fine. Yeah, that's
we can
see,
all
I'd left that off
agree.
because that's not even the topic of conversation.
Exactly, we can all agree on
Um,
that.
But yeah, but the ECU students, and I've done a really good job in them opening my eyes to the things that they care about. And then I'm coming in there and I'm connecting them to ways that they can get involved directly.
Yeah.
And so we're having conversations, especially around local issues. We're talking about how we can go to our city council, or how we can go to our county commissioners, or how even we can get in contact with our General Assembly members. Now, they're supposed to make themselves a lot more available. They're supposed to live near us, but they don't always make that effort to do so.
They're supposed to have town halls.
They're supposed to have town halls.
Candidate forums.
Yeah, they are. They're supposed to, but no, they like to, especially in those long session years, just lock themselves up in their offices in Raleigh and pass bad legislation. So, but connecting them to, directly to the issues. And so we talked about reproductive rights being a huge issue for young people. Having that conversation about how after the Dobbs decision in SCOTUS, that we could have put more focus and attention on North Carolina General Assembly, because it came down to them. And so now having that conversation of, okay, here's where we're at, here's the decision that was made. Now you need to pay even more attention to these General Assembly races, because again, these are the people that have control over these things. We're not talking about all those people sitting up in Congress. We're talking about right down the road in Raleigh. They're making those decisions. So,
or in Newbern.
That it's that local. It's that local that these decisions are being made, and it goes a long way in having that conversation and just breaking down. And so, I don't think that young people are really disengaged with the political process. I think that they're very fired up. I think that they feel that the institutions that we live in and that we're currently live under don't work for us. And as a young person, I can completely agree with that. But that just raises the emphasis on voting not as the most important thing, but the beginning process.
Absolutely.
Of once we go out to vote, great, where can we go from there to ensure that our voices are going to be heard afterwards, and we're actually following through with the change that we want to be made.
I like to think of it as like a branch on a tree. You've got this tree of democracy, of revolution, of freedom, and voting is just one branch of that.
I mean, you can't just want to go and talk to your legislator or go and protest outside of their office if you're not going to go vote too. But at the same time, if
and those things are important to
those
do.
things, no, that's the whole thing. Those things are super important. But you just got to make sure that you're voting.
All these branches.
Because if we're not doing that first step, then we're never going to get to the point where we're actually going to have people that will listen to us. So it's, again, it's not the ends to the means with this. It's the beginning process. So there's no, everything is just as important, but we have to make sure that we're beginning there, we're getting involved there. And I think, if ECU's any litmus test for what we're seeing, they actually have a very high registration rate and voter turnout rate. The groups on campus that are doing this, the Center for Leadership and Civic Engagement on their campus is doing a wonderful job of making sure that the students at ECU are completely engaged with what's going on around there. So I think in the 2024 election, we're going to see a good youth turnout.
That's amazing. Well, you heard that. ECU is like getting their voter
That's the one thing I'll give them. That's the one thing. Well, they need it because they're having such a bad football season. So they need it. Yeah, they need any win they can get. Yeah.
Yes. You brought up a really good point earlier about Dobbs falling and the attacks on reproductive freedoms here in North Carolina, about how they're tied with the North Carolina State Supreme Court or bills that are passed at the General Assembly. And what we saw happen when Dobbs fell was not that court decision came at the federal level. But then all of a sudden, like a snap, in many states, these 6-week, 12-week abortion restrictions seem to just turn on. So it's like they were sitting there and waiting for SCOTUS to roll back Dobbs. But a lot of folks didn't know that that can happen.
Oh, yeah.
The Constitution can be rewritten at the North Carolina level or in other states. A bill can be passed that can kind of almost be not dormant per se,
Yeah.
but not at the top of mind until something like Dobbs falls.
Yeah.
And with saying that, here in North Carolina, we actually have a constitutional amendment on the ballot this year that would alter the language of how folks can vote in North Carolina. And the way that this amendment is written, it's written as if it is a no-brainer. You would think, oh, the way that this is written is the way the law is. It is the law.
Yeah.
And so you, on your ballot, whether you're voting early, in person, or on election day on November 5th, will see a for and against a constitutional amendment to ensure that only citizens, eligible citizens in America and in North Carolina can vote. That is the lay of the law already.
Yeah.
What this constitutional amendment is doing is actually fueling a larger rhetoric of anti-immigrant hate across the United States and here in North Carolina. This amendment that we're seeing on the ballot actually is a copycat bill, and it's going to be on the amendment on the ballots of folks in 8 other states. This is alongside a ton of attacks that are happening against immigrant communities. We're seeing that from candidates at the presidential level, attacking Haitians. We're seeing that happen in Texas, where there are raids happening to Latinos communities and nonprofits like us, or similar organizations that would be like us, nonprofit, nonpartisan organizations that are being raided. There are a lot of families that are scared to send their children to school because there's bomb threats and other things that are happening to schools that have a large immigrant population. And so this is really fueled by a bigoted conspiracy theory that kind of stems from the white supremacist Great Replacement theory, that all these illegal immigrants are coming to steal the election. And that is not true. What that really is setting the stage for is for potential bad actors or people that are in power who are afraid they might lose. What they're doing is they're lying and they're lashing out. And so they're saying and priming and prepping folks with fear to say, oh, well, the election results didn't come my way because of A, B, or C. And we can say that's not true. And we also know that the impact of that rhetoric is very much true.
Oh, 100%. And what you said, that if you're watching this and you feel like that was a lot, you're right, that is a lot, but it's 100% true. That's where we're at right now. And this is all laying the groundwork to spread misinformation after the fact. And it's incredibly dangerous because people's lives are at stake because of these conversations, because of the way that we're talking about immigrants. And I think, I want to say, the North Carolina General Assembly is really good at making these common sense amendments where it's like, nah, it's a no-brainer. But at the same time, if there's ever an amendment on the Constitution pertaining to voting, it's typically going to limit in the long run who can vote and be used as a way to limit who can vote. And so just to keep an eye on that. But I think the most interesting thing about this amendment and how it correlates to this anti-immigrant rhetoric that we have right now is that it's the term non-citizen. Because we don't think about that term in the proper context. When we hear we're making non-citizen and illegal immigrant synonymous. But it's not. There's over 100 different types of visas that people can be on.
That's right.
And they're non-citizens, but they're here legally. And this isn't just people of Hispanic or Latinx, or I was registered people to vote, and someone was from Canada and they couldn't register. So we're not just talking about about that, but understanding that we're not talking about this. They're trying to draw out the fear that there is some type of election integrity issues happening here, and they're just not. And no one's going to risk their already finicky visa status to vote. It's just not happening. I have friends that are on visas and they still have to wait 5-10 years to vote, but they're not going to risk their status to do that. And so just understanding that this is part of the fear mongering that's happening right now. And it's really interesting too to think about this amendment and how it's happening across the nation, and how there's states that already have this amendment. And it almost feels like it was initially made also in response to the expansion of voting rights to non-citizens. That in more localized elections.
And when you say that, we're referring to naturalized systems that go through the naturalization process here in America. And that framework, the Immigration Act, and other frameworks that are at the federal level have been the lay of the law, the lay of the land, the law for literal decades. So to be clear.
And so, like I said, whenever this happens, it feels like it's going to trickle down and ultimately stifle who gets to vote. And so especially in North Carolina, where you have so much industry popping up and you have more people coming in on work visas or on education visas that are here, that are paying taxes, that are getting taxes taken out on their paychecks.
That's right.
They are, they're sending their kids to public schools. They're
infusing the North Carolina economy.
Yes.
Like with billions and millions
they
of dollars.
are. Think about every time you go and you get that 7% sales tax, that's going right back to the local economy. And so it's opening up that, by putting this by passing this amendment, which again is useless. It's absolutely useless. Why do we need a law to reinforce the law that we already have? At this point, we're just passing more laws for the sake of it. And
that's right. And really priming for something worse down the road.
Exactly.
To bring it back to priming for abortion.
Exactly.
We're priming for a proof of citizenship that could potentially pass at the federal level.
Exactly.
The House would try to pass that with our federal budget negotiations that happened earlier this fall. And that failed because that type of issue is not necessarily a concern for folks that care about their house and their rent and their school. Again, this is just a way to fearmonger.
It is. And so I encourage everyone, if you are looking at this amendment, and right now people have already gotten their absentee ballots. They've already sent their absentee ballots back in. Early voting has started. And so we know that ballots have already been submitted. But if you have not yet, make sure you take the time to look at it. And if you want that more information about the amendment, go to ncvoter.org. We have information about it up there. And you can read through what this really says. And also check out Democracy NC's stance on it. We have come out firmly against this amendment.
Vote against this amendment.
Please. Because it's, again, anytime, and this has been the truth for the past couple of times, remember, voter IDs, that was a common sense amendment. And so anytime you see this common sense, take that second look, really pay attention to what's happening here, because they're trying to pull a fast one on us that will be detrimental in the future.
And you can actually check out your ballot at ncvoter.org. We have a ballot builder that is available in 8 different languages. So you can find your language, find your ballot, take a look at it, look at those down ballot races that you were talking about, look at the constitutional amendment. You go to ncvoter.org/guide, and that ballot builder will come up. You choose the language that fits your needs and take a look at your sample ballot. So I want to end on a happy note.
Okay, please, we need it.
What sparks joy for you, Lucas?
Oh, gracious. That's a hard question you're asking.
At least in this busy election season.
In this busy election season. I will say the only good part about having to drive so much is that I get to listen to so much music. And so really what sparks joy in me is just being able to get in the car, turn my brain off, and just listen to a broad array of whatever I'm feeling, whether it's just anything. So finding that time to just close my eyes, listen to some music, and disassociate. That's what's bringing me joy right now. That's directly.
Amazing. I love music too. Music fuels my soul.
So
how do you think you can spread that message of joy to voters this season? Or I think my last question would be, I've got friends that are I have 2 shits about this election right now. I got to pay my rent. My house is flooded. My house was literally blown away. How can I just spark a little joy and be like, let's just hop in the car. Let's go to the polls. Let's get some margaritas afterwards.
Exactly.
What would you say to those folks?
I would really say, just well, I think early voting's the best thing ever, and it's like one of the only good things that we have going for us right now, and so. But it's just a great tool to just get in there and get out for people that are like, I don't want to wait in line forever. So I'm going to say, just to bring a little bit of joy, always go and early vote because it will be quick, it will be fast, and it'll be fun. But I think another way is just like you said, like take someone else with you to go vote. Like I always go with my fiance and we'll go and like get brunch afterwards and just make like a little like morning of it. But just try to vote, take it seriously in that I'm having my voice heard. I'm doing my civic, process right here and in casting my ballot. But at the same time, just, like we said earlier, like voting isn't the most important thing, and especially when a lot of life is happening.
Yeah.
And so finding ways to, not make it and that's the thing too, is when we talk about this, we can sometimes make it, really put that importance on and disregard the things that people are going through.
Yeah.
But just talking about it in a way where it's like, look, let's just go, do it quickly, get over it, listen to some good tunes while we're doing it.
Yeah.
Just it's gonna be fun. We'll exactly, like get some drinks afterwards, like
Yes.
get loose a little bit. It's fine. It's gonna be fun. But yeah, just finding ways to build in some fun and some more interesting things that voting can be sometimes. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lucas, for joining us today.
No, of
and
course.
Thank you to tuning in. This has been another installment of our Built by Us video series. We appreciate you tuning in and be sure to look out for our next episode.